Today's episode is brought to you by Scientist.com, the life science industry's leading R&D orchestration platform. Scientist.com gives researchers instant access to thousands of pre-vetted suppliers, saving time, reducing costs, and accelerating innovation.
Hi, I'm John Gagliano, Senior Director of Biopharm Catalyst.
Hello, I'm Sheff, known as Sheff Station, a 20-year vet in trading biotech stocks.
And this is Biotech Bulls and Breakthroughs. Biopharm Catalyst is not a registered investment advisory firm, and the views on this podcast are not intended to be financial advice. Guests on this podcast may hold the stocks discussed in personal or other investment accounts. This content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening from. Welcome once again to another episode of Biotech Bulls and Breakthroughs. Today is Tuesday, December 9th, and we're very excited to have Sheff on again for what is going to be, I guess, the last Catalyst watch list and sort of recap of 2025 and the last episode that we're doing this year. So, it's been a great year with you, Sheff, and thanks so much for being on again, and thanks for everything that you've done this year for us.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful, John. I mean, just to have the opportunity to talk about the different landscape with regards to the biotech and pharma and how this year has just been, a plethora of activity involving mergers, involving a lot of money, biotech inflow coming in, small cap and mid cap companies really playing a part, and how that's going to matriculate into next year. I think it's going to be significant and important for 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as always, there's so much to talk about. Obviously, we've got JP Morgan coming up in a couple of weeks to sort of set the stage for 2026. But I guess just, one of the things that I like to do, obviously, just given that we are at year end, is just get your thoughts on overall how the year went, whether that is, from a macroeconomic standpoint, or just from individual trades, biotech in general. How did you feel 2025 was, and what were some of the highlights and or it can also be negatives that you found in 2025?
I thought that 2025 went really well because we started to see a lot more clarity from the FDA. We started to see, more consistency with the agency and how they were handling complete response letters. A lot more clarity for investors in terms of what specifically was in those letters that led to a CRL and how companies were working to rectify these situations and so that the companies could continue to grow from slight pullbacks. So we saw that. We saw a lot more money coming into biotech. We saw, big companies looking at smaller companies. We saw a lot of partnering. And obviously with partnering and license buy-ins, it gives these smaller companies a chance to prove to the larger companies that, they're worthy of not only partnership, but getting bought out. So we saw, 2 or 3 big ones this year. And so I think next year, as we move into JP Morgan, there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm from what we've seen to the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Obviously, recently, there's been some, little shakeup with Richard Pazdur coming in initially and then deciding that, no, he's not going to retire, and that he's going to retire now. And so that was a little bit of a surprise, but I don't think that that's going to slow the FDA down in terms of transparency and making sure that the FDA is being transparent with companies so that companies can continue to grow.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned about the CRLs is, particularly important because there's a lot of times that we've discussed on this podcast some of these trades that you have done. And a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong here, some of these companies have been issued a CRL in the past, maybe once, maybe twice, maybe three times. And the closer that they get and the more clarity they have around what the issue is, the more confidence that you can have that that drug is going to be approved that next time. I mean, obviously, for anyone listening, CRL obviously doesn't mean the end of the line, right? It just means that they have to go back to the drawing board and revisit whatever the issues that the FDA had with their trials were, right? So that it's
Absolutely.
something that I think the more transparency and clarity around that gives investors again more of a understanding of, okay, well, what were these problems? Are they something that are the company is able to resolve easily? And I think, like I said, I think you've traded several of these in the past.
Definitely. And, the other thing we're seeing is because there's clarity around it, we're seeing re-ratings from these firms. We're seeing, Cowen come out and say, once this stock is approved, we'll be able to look at it and re-rate, the companies. And oftentimes in the past, we would see these PDUFA plays get sold off immediately. But now with partnerships and with re-ratings of these stocks, because obviously the valuations are a lot more attractive, we're going to see investors staying put. And oftentimes, too, that has a reflection on a lot of the 13Fs that we see, where we see, a lot of these healthcare funds coming in and participating in offerings, where typically when a company would do an offering or we hear the term pipe, we
Yeah.
would sell off. Now we're seeing that other companies are involved, institutions that have done historically well investing in young biotech companies such as 8R1 Capital Management or Affinity Advisors or Opali or other you know you know um, other healthcare institutions that
Yeah.
really play a part. And the other thing, as you mentioned before, is in terms of clarity with PDUFAs and CRLs, we're also seeing more meetings with the FDA. We're seeing more Type C meetings, or Type B or Type A. Type A are typically a small minor adjustment. Type C, which we're seeing now, like we'll talk about a few companies that have Type C meetings where, they have one study that they're hoping, qualifies them of one phase 3 study to submit an NDA, where typically two studies were required, two phase 3 studies to show statistical significance in terms of efficacy. Only one is being required now in some instances. So we're seeing that the FDA is willing to work closer with these smaller
Yeah.
companies and thus reducing the risk and increasing the reward appetite for these investors.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more there. And so, you know, we're obviously going to we'll do another episode kind of discussing 2026 post JPM once we have a little bit more clarity. Obviously we get a lot of insight, and JPM sort of sets the stage for what the year is going to look like. But I guess just ahead of that, right, with what now before JPM is starting, um what are your thoughts going into next year? What do you think you think there's going to be more of this clarity? Do you think that that's going to continue? Is there, what are you kind of looking at, and what are you excited for in the new year, let's say?
I'm excited for a lot of these meetings that are going to be coming up. Like we've got, some PDUFA plays. We've got TVTX. We've got AQST. We have more clarity where FDA is saying, you know what? We don't need an AdCom. I believe there might have been one AdCom this year for PDUFA. There was very few because in
Yeah.
the past I would trade around the AdComs, and
Yeah.
then after the AdCom scenario, I would trade ahead of the PDUFA date. I don't recall doing that this year. And
Right.
even Aquestive, who's got a PDUFA in January, the FDA said, we're good. We have the data that we need. We don't need you to do a AdCom. We were told that TVTX, which has an approval in January, Travere Therapeutics, was supposed to have an AdCom prior to the PDUFA.
Yeah.
We have yet to hear for an AdCom, and that
Yeah.
should have happened. It
Yeah.
typically happens 6 weeks out. But that hasn't happened. So I'm
And
wondering
that's
if they
something that we
changed their
track on
tunes.
our PDUFA calendar as well. And yeah, we certainly have not seen, nearly as many as we had in the past. So that is interesting. And a lot of our users are keen on, on tracking that and trading around those dates as well.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing is, at JP Morgan, we're going to see a lot more talk in, ulcerative colitis. And, we're going to hear talks on, GPL1s. There's small cap companies that are being looked at that, are able to help people maintain weight after they go off of a GLP-1, because we know that right now obesity is one of the biggest fields in all of in all of the biotech space. And we're going to start seeing also one of the things that the agency, the FDA has talked about is orphan drug diseases. So we're going to be seeing a lot more on, that space. And so I think that's going to give opportunities for investors to invest in and follow closely. So 2026 is going to be very promising because of the year that we've had in 2025, where we haven't had a significantly down quarter all year.
Right.
Typically, quarter three is a kind of a pause and wait, because there's not big biotech meetings into the August, July, August, September. But with October, November, December in the fourth quarter, obviously we've got the American Society of Hematology meeting that just wrapped up. We have the San Antonio Breast Cancer Conference that is starting today through the 12th. And so those are the two meetings that typically wrap up and create a lot of investor interest as we go into the new year for JP Morgan in January.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I think that, that makes a lot of sense. And there certainly is a lot of reason to be excited about. And we'll have a little bit more insights, we'll say, early to mid January after that meeting takes place. And we'll certainly do another episode to kind of discuss that and get a little bit of a clearer picture for 2026. If you find the information that Sheff is presenting on this podcast useful and would like to gain more insights into his trading strategy for individual tickers, you can donate to this charity, the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes, and all individuals donating $300 or more get full access to his VIP private X account. Founded in 2007, the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes is a national leader dedicated to improving the quality of life for children, youth, and adults through participation in sports and physical activity in communities across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. NWABA's programs focus on helping people who are blind build confidence, gain self-esteem, develop friendships, and reach their greatest potential. You can donate by clicking on the link at the bottom of our podcast page, www.biofarmcatalyst.com/podcast, or via the link in the YouTube video description. I guess, let's just jump right into, sort of your, I guess, the last watch list of 2025 and just sort of what you're looking at as we end the year and head into the new year.
No, that's great. And here's the thing that's great about this. I think with us having 2 to 3 weeks left, you really have a lot of companies that are looking to close out for year end.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. And so what are these catalysts that are going to be year end and are going to progress into the new year that are really going to accelerate? And I'll start with RZLT. Resolute. It's a late-stage rare biotech company developing therapies for hyperinsulinism. They've got data in December. They've got 69 million shares outstanding. They've got a ton of cash and no debt. And they have top-line data that they've guided for in December. It's going to represent a pivotal moment for the company as it pursues their first approved therapy ever for congenital HI. And the drug that they have is Ursodietug, which is RZ358. It's a fully human monoclonal antibody that binds to the insulin receptor to blunt excessive signaling caused by insulin and IGF-2. So it is definitely in a unique space. It's one of the top buys from Guggenheim. So Debjit Shapanahay is one of the analysts who's covered it closely. I think they're going to have positive data. It's definitely a binary event. I don't trade very many binary events, but the reason I have shares in this one is because of the institutional money that's been put in. You got Infinity Advisors, who has an outstanding track record that is involved with it. And I also think that the fact that they have 2 breakthrough designations for 2 different indications and that their past data was solid, and this is their second phase 3, that I think that's going to be positive. So Resolute is one that investors are looking forward to with the Sunrise data in December. So that data should be any time now. So people will ask, should I get, what kind of position? Do I have a big position? No, I don't. I don't believe in, um, establishing big positions in binary events
Yeah.
unless there's been past studies that I have the same identical characteristics and qualification for a new study that allows them to not go off track. So, but I like this one, and we'll see. Everyone should be watching it. I think it's going to be a significant event for the company here coming up. The other one is, I've talked about Milestone Pharma. That's a PDUFA play it says it's on December 13th, which would obviously be a Saturday. But I believe that data, that approval is going to come on Thursday or Friday. It offers a compelling risk reward. As the market fundamentally misinterpreted the CRL in February. The reason being is that the CRL was it was not a red flag for the company, for Cardamist, for the safety or efficacy. It was more a solvable process that stemmed from an updated FDA guidance on nitrosamines, which is a compound in the agents. Which everyone believes has been resolved because, of course, the FDA came back and told them, hey, we're good to go. So I see a high probability of approval on December 13th. That's going to serve as a major catalyst for the company, where several firms have said, hey, we're going to re-rate after approval. And so that's for, again, they've already had a CRL, and they've addressed the issues of the FDA, and I think that's going to be approved on or near the 13th. So watch for that one. We've talked about that in the past, and that one is pretty significant. PDUFA play. The other one is that is going to have a near-term event is ATOS. It's called Atosa Therapeutics. They had a Type C meeting with the FDA that was complete, but they just submitted an IND for their Z-Endox, which is for metastatic breast cancer. And so they have an IND filing. Obviously, they're awaiting. The IND was submitted in early December. Late November, early December, and usually the FDA responds within 30 days. I think that'll be a significant catalyst event for Atos Therapeutics. Because of course it is in metastatic breast cancer, and INDs on typically with small cap companies can really cause the stock price to appreciate. The stock price is 85 cents. The company has, $40 million in cash, and there's a $7 price target by H.C. Wainwright, and so I think that IND is going to spur a lot of opportunities for setting up clinical trials in 2026. So that's something to look forward to. That's ATOS. ABSI is another one. They are on track for ABS 201. They've got a December 11th KOL seminar, which is their next key catalyst. And they have an AI platform for the treatment of androgenetic alopecia, with interim data anticipated in the second half of 26. But this key opinion leader seminar is going to really dive into their research, their R&D, and find out what other drugs that they have that are going to be upcoming. So they're looking at a best-in-class approach to treating hair loss, given its scientific proof of concept that they've demonstrated in animal studies. So that's one to look at for near term. And obviously, the 11th is right around the corner. I don't own that one. I'm watching it, and I think it just warrants to keep attention on it, obviously, because it's a near-term catalyst that a lot of institutions will be watching. Ovid. We've talked about Ovid Therapeutics. They had their OV329 data that was shared in October. It took the stock from 50 cents to $2. It's pulled back since then to $1.30 or $1.40. When it got to the $2 range, the $1.80 to $2 range back in October, they did a funding with Affinity at Adar Capital Management, RA Capital, a lot of healthcare institutions came in and they said, this is a pill that could provide a platform for therapies. And so they initiated their open label seizure reduction data. And they're going to have data in the second half of 26, but they also have a key catalyst in December, which is for their OV350. It's their KCC2 franchise. They're going to have pharmacokinetic and safety data in December. Obviously, people know that typically when I like to invest in companies, I like to invest in companies that don't have hard endpoints with statistical significance needed in a phase 3 study. So oftentimes
Yeah.
pharmacokinetic data, safety data often plays well to, investor interest and the share price doing good things. So that stock right now is at about $1.60. When that data comes out, I think there'll be some fanfare. It could, pop to 230, 240 based on the calls and what it's looking at right now. So we'll see there. ALDX is another PDUFA. Aldestra Therapeutics, they resubmitted their NDA for Reproxalap in dry eye disease. It's set for December 16th. And obviously, that goes to what we talked about in terms of a prior CRL and what they've done with the company to address that. So the company's resubmitted the NDA following positive results from their second resubmission of their chamber trial, which the company believed addressed concerns raised by the FDA. In the complete response, we talked about misbalance of baseline scores across treatment arms that was in the first resubmission trial. So notably, the company indicated that the NDA resubmission package contains only data from the chamber trial, which means that it does not include data from the negative field trial. So it's the positive data they wanted. They got a quick turnaround. So that's December 16th. That's one I don't own. Probably will look to buy shares because it is a resubmission with a PDUFA. Obviously, I'm not as confident in that one as I am MIST, or I probably would have been in it. MIST obviously offers a higher risk, a reward versus risk, because when we were buying into MIST, it was 170, 180. It's 280 now. $5 price target. So I see a higher upside there versus Aldera, which is in the $5 range, but it's still one to keep in mind. PRQR is one that we've seen pop here recently over the last 2 or 3 days from $2 to, I believe it was up to $2.40 today. They've got they submitted a CTA for their phase 1 AX -0810 for cholestatic diseases. The first clinical readout is on track for fourth quarter. It's also one that's heavily owned by Affinity. And so, they're, like I mentioned, they've got phase 1 data for the OX810, targeting NTCP for cholestatic diseases, marking the first step, which is really important towards moving its proprietary Axiomer RNA editing platform. So that's, the RNA editing platform is what a lot of larger companies are looking to smaller companies for, because they have the adaptability and the maneuverability to get through a lot of these trials, phase 1 and phase 2. After they perform with phase 1, they often become very attractive for companies with phase 2. And this company's already got partnerships with Sanofi and a few other ones. So I think this is going to be a big update for them. So again, they're expecting data on target engagement, biomarkers, and dosing in the fourth quarter, which is right around the corner.
Yeah.
So I like that one. Here's the one I really like a lot. We talk about, we've talked, John, in the past about GLP-1s.
Yeah.
And how long does a patient stay on GLP-1s? At what point do they lose enough weight where it flatlines and it no longer helps them?
Right. Right.
And they start to gain weight again. So that's been the big question. Well, there's a company, that called Fractal Health, ticker symbol GUTS, guts, which is interesting. Because obviously it's like, you don't have the guts to buy our stock.
Yeah,
Yes, I do.
right.
I just, but they've got 6-month data from the open label reveal cohort that's expected in Q4. That data came out and it was positive. It basically said that, hey, when you have this procedure done called the Revita, that it maintained weight loss, and it was an open label study, so they knew who was getting the procedure and who was on GLP-1s
Yeah.
and how they benefited from it. Well, in the first half, they're going to have in the first quarter of 2026, they're going to have 6-month data from the Remain study. So the Reveal was what we just saw. The Remain is mid cohort data that is going to show weight loss after GLP-1 discontinuation. And so we saw 3-month data. Now we're going to see 6-month data, and that data is going to be revealed in January. And what I will say that's extremely important is that in the third quarter, every single institution, I mean, there was 7 different institution new funds that bought in or added.
Mhm.
No fund, I think there was 100,000 shares that were, of a fund that reduced. No fund exited or completely sold out. And there was, significant amount of new funds. So there's a lot of anticipation and enthusiasm around this stock.
Hmm.
Obviously, it was in the dollar range a couple months ago, and right now it's about 220. But there's still a lot of positives around this stock. I think they're really going to change how GLP-1s are looked at in patients who, have leveled off on a GLP-1
Yeah.
and want to maintain their weight,
Yeah.
maintain the weight loss that they've had. So that GUTS is definitely one to look at. Another one, VTYX. Oh, real quick, I own Guts. I own a lot of Guts, because I have guts to own it. They just did 83 million in underwriter offerings. That's expected to extend their cash runway through their upcoming clinical trials through 2027. So they've got plenty of cash through 2027, and so I mean that's a good year plus. So we're looking at when we look at these biotechs and see where they are cash wise. That's definitely one to watch. Ventix. This is one that I'm liking for next year into JP Morgan. They've got they've got a deal with Sanofi. Sanofi gets the first right of refusal for their drug, but basically um, they're a cardiovascular disease company, and you know they're going to have updated data in January where basically they just changed how they're dosing. They go from BID dosing to QD dosing. It's not going to affect the pharmacokinetics of the drug. It's actually going to be more tolerated for they're expecting it. They're hoping that it's more tolerated for the patients. Obviously, it makes sense if you go from BID to QD. But I think that's going to really drive continued involvement with investors and also, Sanofi. It gives them the first look and see, whether their 3232 program is attractive to them, and whether they're interested in looking at M&A activity. I think a lot of people believe that, and we've seen it with, Oppenheimer and Guggenheim, but mainly Oppenheimer thinking that they could end up being a takeover target in 2026. So,
Mm.
one I'm really excited about and one I own a lot of. And the reason I own it is because I see right now they've already had 2 phase 3 studies that have been positive, right? And so now, the study that they're looking at in phase 2 is just looking at, how the drug is dosed and whether it's tolerated or not. But they've already got the partnership with Sanofi. It's just a matter of whether Sanofi wants to come in and
Yeah.
do more. So we'll see. I think it's more risk off, and it's just having the patience to stick with that company. Ganex, GANX. They've got data in the fourth quarter, phase 1B clinical study to evaluate GT-02287 in people with Parkinson's. And so, but what I like here is they're focusing on genetic markers. So, if you have this genetic mutation, GBA1, do you do better with the Ganex drug versus if you don't have this genetic mutation? And so oftentimes, a lot is solved and the number of patients that are able to tolerate and have efficacy from that.
Yeah.
So they're going to be announcing completion. They announced the completion of their phase 1B clinical trial evaluating that genetic mutation in people with Parkinson's. And they're expecting data in the fourth quarter, which is in December since we're in the fourth quarter. So that's one to look at. I own that one as well. That's GANX. And then everyone knows RLYB. I own that. That's Rally Bio. They've got 25 million in cash. The stock is around 65 cents. I think it should be much higher because they deal in the C5a space or C5 inhibitor. It's designed as a once weekly low volume injection, does not require loading dose, and they're positioning it as a potential best in class therapy. It's being used for PTR, which is immune platelet transfusion refractoriness, and then APS, which is refractory antiphospholipid syndrome. They're two complement driven disorders with limited treatment options. So if you're talking about an ultra orphan drug space, you're talking about a company with no debt, 25 million in cash. They've got 25 million in the float. It's a
Mhm.
70-cent company. They've got cash, a runway through the end of 2026. And then they've got pharmacokinetic data. Their first cohort was positive in October, and the really important second cohort they're looking at for December. And so we'll see their prior phase 1 multiple ascending dose demonstrated a 93% sustained reduction in C5 levels through day 29, supporting its potential efficacy. They're expecting the pharmacokinetic dosing of cohort 2 to be similar. So that's going to be in December. I like it a lot, and we're going to see, what happens there. I think, 52-week low is, like 30 cents, but again, they've got institutional buyers. Johnson and Johnson is the biggest investor in the company, so I like
Mhm.
that one. Um, I know Inovio Pharma. What are we expecting with Inovio? Well, they submitted at the end of November, they submitted their BLA for acceptance with priority review. So it takes that, and they did this in October, October 30th. So the FDA takes 60 days for a BLA to get back. And so what are they expecting? Well, their registrational lead program is INO 3107. So that's for the treatment of recurrent respiratory um, papillomatosis, so RRP. There's already another company, Replimune, RAPL, that has a drug approved, for that space. It's a rare disease where you get tissue that
Yeah.
that um, ends up replicating, and it becomes these tumors in your throat, in your esophageal tract. And so their data has looked really, really good. And they did a rolling submission BLA on 10/30. They're seeking accelerated approval with a goal of an FDA acceptance, obviously by December 30th. But what they're expecting is priority review. If they
Mhm.
get an approval with priority review, the stock is going to fly. I don't see why they wouldn't, because Replimune had the same priority review and they had breakthrough designation
Yeah.
and they got priority review.
I think
So
we've talked about them before on here.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
they've had a pretty good launch so far. And so they've got orphan drug, they've got breakthrough designations in the US, they've got orphan drug in the EU. They've established commercial scale manufacturing, so that's not an issue. They've got a deep pipeline with therapeutic and vaccine candidates that have multiple and near term catalysts. And the key is they've got 50 million in cash through not just through when they reported the results on 9/30. So I really like that company, and so that's Inovio. It was $2 a few days ago. It's popped up to around 220, but I still think it has room to run. And again, does it run if it's just a regular BLA? Potentially, but then I think it
Mhm.
pulls back. But I think if they get the priority review, it'll do way better because of the breakthrough designation. So keep that in mind. Um, Pyxis, ticker symbol PYXS. They've got year-end 25 disclosure of preliminary MICVO data. Um, and so they've preliminary MICVO data from their cohort expansion strategy study and um, small, it's cutaneous cell, it's head and neck. It's likely to confirm the provocative efficacy signal that was previously observed in pretreated patients during their dose escalation. So obviously, I like the risk reward, and we've seen their price appreciate over the past few months to show that. Um, I don't own it right now, because I've still got money in Mist and some of these other PDUFA plays that I feel more comfortable with. But I'm watching it closely. I may end up taking a position, but I haven't so far. Um, the other one is Acrivion, ACRV. Um, they've got cash of 148 million. They've got an ACR 368 update and ACR 2316 data update in December. And so, that stock I think is going to appreciate here over the next few months. Um, they've got data in December for their ACR 2316. It's a dual WEE1 and PKMYT1 inhibitor. And so we'll see. It's a dose escalation study in solid tumors, and they're using it in different types of tumors. So I think that's the risk reward favors the reward because it is a phase 1 study, and they've already shown positive signals in the past. I think the stock is $2 and change right now. Net cash per share is $3.83. They've got a $6 price target from Piper Sandler. So, I really like that. So
Yeah.
those are the stocks for the December, and I'm going to go over a few for the new year that I really like. And then we'll be good for 2026. Sologenics. Sologenics is $1.60. It's a micro cap play, but Sologenics has solid data coming up um, in dermatology. They're going to be looking at their phase 2A clinical results study. Here's what I like. There was a big position was just put in by Armistice, and Stephen Boyd filed a He's filed an SC13G filing showing a 7% ownership in the company. Now, he has a history of buying ahead of catalysts, and the catalysts always do well. He's done this before with Sologenics. He's done it twice before into data. So, with him having filed the SC13G and doing a 7% stake in November, their data I believe their phase 2A data is going to do well, and so that's going to be in December. It's going to be in late December, and so, we'll see what happens there. You've got Quince Therapeutics, QNCX. So I do own Sologenics. I own a lot of Sologenics. I really like that because of Stephen Boyd and his history. Quince Therapeutics is a orphan drug company that they've got data in it'll be in February. They specifically said February, and it's for ataxia telangiectasia, which is AT. They're going to have phase 3 top line results in AT in the first quarter, following their NEAT trial, which completed its enrollment. It's 50 patients who have completed the trial to date. It's an open label extension study. So people who did well on the study, which was double-blind, placebo-controlled, can go on the open label extension study. Almost all of the patients have gone on the open label extension study, showing that patients tolerated it and did extremely well and transitioned. The company also announced a partnership with Option Healthcare, which sets the stage for them to leverage the QNCX, their specialty pharma and ambulatory infusion, to provide services for the AT and additional indications to come, such as Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which is a near-term priority. What I like about this is Adar Capital Management took a huge position in this in the third quarter. Adar has done well with ABVX. They bought a huge position in ABVX, Abivex, when Abivex was $8 or $9 a share, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to buy into Abivex. I didn't. I should have. I bought a smaller position. That stock went to $70 on phase 3. It's over 120 now. But he sees these things ahead. This is, investing where institutions are investing. And this, John, it goes to your point, what worked well in 2025. And that was following the smart money, following institutions that are seeing things ahead of what's happening. Ovid, now QNCX. We talked about this. It's hitting $4, but again, they have data in February. So I think even if you played it as a catalyst play, I think it's going to go, significantly higher, maybe to 6 or 7 prior to their data in February, which I believe will be positive.
Yeah.
So I like that. Pepgen, PEPG, they've got first quarter multi-ascending dose data. Um, their single ascending dose data was in October, and they hit their endpoints. We saw that stock go from $1.50, $50, $60 to $5 plus. And they're promising splicing data that they're looking to win on safety again, which would be a huge read for their multiple ascending dose since they've already hit their primary endpoints in the single ascending dose. So I think we saw the data in early Q4. We're going to see the data in early Q1. Again, another play where there's just a significant amount of institutions involved, a lot of smart money. I own PepGen. I like it a lot. And I think that data from their freedom study, the 5 milligram freedom study, 5 milligrams per kg is going to be positive. And that's an expected readout shortly. TVTX, many firms, continue to hold a positive bias on the Filspari setup ahead of what was supposed to be a fourth quarter AdCom that hasn't happened yet. They haven't moved the goal line for the PDUFA date. It's still expected in the 13th of January for their FSGS indication. So I haven't taken a position. I'm kind of holding and sitting tight to see what they do with this AdCom. Seems pretty close, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
within 6 weeks. That typically doesn't happen. So, moving on to we talked about this one earlier, AQST, Aquestive Therapeutics. They've got a January 31st PDUFA. The FDA said there's no required PDUFA for anafalam, which it basically, it's a regulatory path that's de-risked ahead of their January PDUFA date because they don't need an AdCom. The FDA determined that they're not required to have one for anafalam, which is their dibupryfophrine sublingual film. This de-risking event removes this overhang that caused a lot of volatility in the stock because investors weren't sure if they had an AdCom, whether it would be negative, but with the FDA pulling that and there'd be so much time in between, that stock has ran. It ran, at the time when I was talking about it before, was $5 and change. It's up over $6. So that is going to be one for January, the end of January. And then the final two are GOS, which is Gossamer. That one is $340 right now. They've got a hard line date of February. It's in anticipation of seralutinib, their 48-week phase 3 Procera top line data in PAH, pulmonary arterial hypertension, on track for February 2026. There's been a lot of discussion on what they think, and a lot of firms have come out and said we think that data is going to be positive. So that's one to watch into December, and I think that is also potential takeout in 2026, along with VTYX, potentially Ovid. And also QNCX, which I think is going to be looked at as a potential takeout as well. But that's what I've got for the year. I think those are key stocks to look at. I think there's a lot of cash. There's a lot of institutional investments, and there's a lot of traction with companies that are having follow-up studies that have already been successful in previous studies. And I think those are the three things that worked in 2025 in terms of trading around those catalysts, and those are the exact things that I think are going to fuel 2026 moving forward.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more there, Sheff. And as always, that was super insightful. Talked about a ton of companies, a ton of catalysts, just obviously as we enter the end of the year, and there's going to be more and more of that as we get into 2026. So that was an excellent way to end the year. And, again, congrats on the trading this year. I think, you've done exceptionally well, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And I think in 2026, we're gonna see more of that with all of the excitement that we have going on. So again, really appreciate your insights and your time. And for anyone on the call, obviously, we're at the end of the year. We've been doing this since April. We're going to continue to do it in 2026. If there's anything else you want to hear about, anything you want us to change about the podcast, any other topics you want to hear about, please let us know. Subscribe to the channel, like the page, and comment and let us know what else you want to hear. Yeah, we're really excited to close out the year and be back in 2026.
Yeah, this is exciting, and I also enjoy the different enhancements that have helped catalyst trading within biopharm catalyst. Again, we talk about the 13 Gs that come out, right on time.
Yeah.
We talk about the catalyst where you go through and it's specific dates. Like you guys, Biopharm Catalyst did that for ASH. They've done it for San
Yeah.
Antonio breast cancer. So I encourage folks to, look at these catalysts and really have a definitive set timeline of when you want to trade around these catalysts so that if you're not sure, you don't want to get caught up in it. And I think the Biopharm Catalyst calendar, and being able to track that allows you to, really manage your expectations around these catalyst trades. And especially if you're a beginner and you don't feel comfortable holding through, it's really important. It's really important to know that. So all that to
Yeah.
say. So anyway, that's it.
Absolutely. And as we head into like we said, as we head into JP Morgan and the end of the year, we are going to be launching our JP Morgan dashboard and preview, which we do every year for any of the big conferences. As Chef mentioned, we usually try to do, a special, kind of dashboard for those conferences. We do it for ASH, we do it for ASCO, we do it for ESMO usually, and we'll be doing it for JP Morgan as well. So say that should be launched, I believe, the week of the 15th of December.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be ahead of the curve there. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we really appreciate your guys' time. And Chef, have a great holiday season. If I don't talk to you, and a great end of the year, and everyone who's listened as well. And we'll be back in 2026.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, John,
Yeah.
and appreciate all the expertise around these and getting these going for the readers. Greatly
Yeah.
appreciated.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.